Sault Ste. Marie, a city of 75,000 people, is located in northern Ontario. Like all places, they have their hopes and dreams. Some rise higher than the clouds, others fall through the cracks in the social net. The more you focus on something, the more its complexities reveal themselves. The same is true for homelessness and its many causes, problems, and solutions.
In Sault Ste. Marie, it's not as visible in the community. So it would be more couch surfing, which is like staying with friends or relatives, just kind of going from place to place, wherever you can find a place to stay for the night. So there's never ever really any security.
It's a huge problem here, but it's not in the open eyes. What it is you'll have one or two people paying rent, collecting a check, or either holding down a job, and then just everybody piling in there.
We know that we do have a homeless problem, but it's invisible. And what I mean is you don't see people sleeping on the streets.
It's an endless battle. They'll have to move quite frequently, get evicted and move to another place or find someone else to crash with, and it's an ongoing process. Yeah.
So that's the difference. Whereas in Toronto, you'll go outside and you'll see people sleeping on the street. It's also been a problem for people in Sault Ste. Marie to recognize and realize and accept that there is homelessness because it's not as visible. So if you can't see it, it's not there.
Because the vast majority of homelessness is invisible in Sault Ste. Marie, its complexities have remained hidden from the common citizen. We present for you a perspective from those who have experienced homelessness and those who advocate on their behalf.
I'm born and raised pretty much in the Sioux. I left home probably when I was about 14. Started living on the streets here in Sault Ste. Marie. There was no places, no shelters then, and I did a lot of couch surfing and just randomly staying at my friends' parents' houses and stuff. There's actually a house not too far from here when it was cold outside. They're really close together, so it would block the wind. And that used to be my little cubby hole.
There'd be times when I'd be paranoid as hell and I'd be alone in my own house. And I just have to get out of there. I couldn't stay where I was, and I didn't feel safe in my own apartment. So I'd end up on the streets, right, just wandering around, panhandling, doing whatever. And then with my addiction problems, it'd be like I get kicked out of an apartment, and then I get kicked out of another apartment.
Around 16 or beginning of 17, that's when I decided to move down to Toronto. Like a lot of people from Sault Ste. Marie, that a lot of people that are homeless or working class, struggling to survive, have to relocate to larger cities because we just don't have the programs.
When I was on the streets, I was talking a bit about how there's no privacy, and I know how it felt for me every morning. I might be sleeping in a certain park, and you wake up in the morning and there's a group of teenage school kids sitting at the table near you, and you wake up and they all stop talking and look at you.
My family pretty much gave up on me for a while there, but it's all been caused by my sickness. Is that just for a while there I was just going nuts, and I didn't know how to get out of the cage I felt like I was in. I was just so messed up, thoughts screaming in my head and stuff, because of schizoaffective, and
got pretty heavy into drugs, seen a lot of friends go down, a lot of people die, seen a lot of people, mentally just not return.
Friend I used to chum around with. First time I arrived in Toronto, I was 20 years old, and he was one of my best friends, and he was drinking, and he was completely drunk, and he got beat up pretty bad, and they kicked him in the head, and they beat him to the pulp, and he died instantly, and it's pretty heavy, when I had friends staying on the streets and they died, pretty sad, if you're living on the streets.
To live that life and to live it sober I don't know how anyone would do it. You know, it's like sometimes you need to numb your brain and, you know, just once you start, it's a hard one to stop.
That's just your reality, that you're this public spectacle, like you're in a freak show or something, and it's really, really hard not to take the edge off things by doing drugs or drinking, because, you know, you're constantly out there being looked at and judged, and, you know, to do that completely sober is very, very hard.
It's really difficult, especially if you have the addictions. Then when you're dope sick and you're addicted to heroin because you've gotten there, you know, like you need that next fix no matter what, and that's your main concern. You don't want to be, you know, you don't want to be there like being dope sick, and, you know, you're not worried about going out and getting a job because that's not a reality to you. You have to make it through the next day.
People were constantly trying to help me, but I was so messed up that I was fighting against all the people trying to help me, right? So what was I was just, in a way, I was really screwing myself.
While many who are homeless battle their addictions, they also face an onslaught of negative stereotypes from the general public.
You think of a poor homeless person and you think of the old crazy man with a beard and a jug in his hand and gibbering away, you know, like, and that's not the face of poverty.
A lot of people are like, oh, you're lazy, you're blah, 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 but living that life is the hardest thing that anyone can do. Like, there's no laziness about it. You know, it's a hard life to go out there and have to try and survive every day. You know, it's harder than anyone working behind a desk or working a labor job, you know, like it's 24/7.
It's degrading, it's disempowering, it's demoralizing. It's like, I mean, that's why I liked squeegeeing better, because at least you're doing something. But there are those days when it rains and you don't have any money and you're hungry, and, you know, people like to think that all you do is make money to buy crack or something, but it's not true. You do get hungry, and you know, those days you do have to ask for money, and like, I hated doing it. I had to sometimes though.
So where did the notion of the lazy homeless person come from? To understand the origins of this stigma, we need to travel back in time to before the stigma existed and analyze what factors led to its change.
Under feudalism, the Catholic Church at the time, was before the Protestant Reformation and the Protestant ethic. Under Catholicism, the idea of the poor was something, in fact, to be admired, that the blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the earth, that we should all help out the poor and think of them as being people who are unfortunate, but not something which was close to being a criminal. Feudalism was a very hierarchical, socially unequal system, very unequal, with lords and serfs and so on. At least there was a certain obligation by the elite in that society to make sure that everyone's very basic needs were met, their food, their housing, and so on. But when capitalism emerged in the 1700s and well into the 1800s, there was a real regimentation of people's lives. They were going to have to go and work in factories that were miserable, horrible places where they worked from very early in the morning till very late at night. There was child labor, no protection, no unions, and people were paid absolute, like, subsistence wage, barely subsistence wages.
With the fall of feudalism, there was no longer a guarantee that the owners of land and factories would provide adequate living or working standards. A new form of control was needed to motivate people who resisted the new system.
The treatment of people who are found begging was to often do things like brand them with a V, the way for vagrant, the way you would with a cow, branding an animal. They actually branded people so that it would be so shameful. They would put them in jail or put them in stocks, and people could throw things at them and so on. And it was all because they begged. Yeah. So this was very shameful. It became a criminal offense to beg. And so that was when the whole notion of punishing the poor became very severe, because they were punished in order to make it so horrible that nobody would opt for that as an alternative to working in these early factories in early capitalism. Now we're seeing a resurgence of this same treatment of the poor because we're going through another revolution. That was the Industrial Revolution. Now we're going through the computer revolution and globalization of capitalism. Now that capitalism has gone global, the capitalist enterprises can take their corporations and move from one country to another wherever they can get cheaper labor. And as a result, the same kind of poor bashing is happening, because this is leaving people in countries like Canada and cities like Sault Ste. Marie without jobs. And so once again, there's the need to somehow blame the victim, to blame the poor person instead of the macroeconomic situation.
Although we no longer brand those who are begging, much of society still holds the values that the poor are to blame for their situation. This blame did not come from hundreds of years of evidence, but rather from the ideology of capitalism. In a capitalist economy, the acquisition of goods symbolizes the success or value of a person. This belief is opposite to the Christian view that morality carries more value than material possessions. Therefore, those who do not seek the constant accumulation of wealth are seen as lazy or apathetic because they are rejecting the present-day ideology. The media reinforces these stereotypes about the poor and homeless by filtering the information that we receive.
I don't remember ever seeing anything on a movie or on a TV show about poor youth who start up Food Not Bombs or something, you know? Like, there's a lot of street youth who are really organized and really active, but you don't see that side. You see the drugs, you see, prostitution, you see all these things that people see as negative.
We can look at squeegeeing as an example of how the media shaped people's views in the mid-90s.
The first summer that I ended up in Toronto on the streets, squeegeeing had just kind of taken off, and it was like the new thing, and it was almost like squeegee kids were stars almost. It was really weird. Like, we had reporters coming into the park where we lived, and everyone painted a good picture of us, and we were like, poor kids trying to make our way, and everything was great. And then some of the kids would go on, talk to the media, and they'd want to make themselves look really good, so they'd say like, oh yeah, we make about $400 every day, which was totally not true. So I guess people kind of thought, well, this poor kid is making way more than me, I don't want to support them. And so after that, like, it just went downhill fast.
The media, recent government cutbacks, and globalization have led to less support for those living in poverty or homelessness. The Soup Kitchen Community Center, located on the west side of Sault Ste. Marie, offers relief for those affected by these factors.
Back when I was a teenager and first starting out, we didn't have soup kitchens or any place like it. We had to depend on our families.
In the last 10 years, things have come really a long way because we didn't have the men's shelter or the youth shelter, and the soup kitchen 10 years ago was just a soup kitchen, but now we have community kitchens where people learn to cook. We have good food box program. We deliver 200 boxes of fresh fruits and vegetables every month. And we have a children's program, which I think is one of our most important programs because the children learn new skills and have a really good opportunity for enrichment. So I think things have come a long way from 10 years ago.
I've seen a lot come through the door that had nothing. And I've sent extra sandwiches out with them so they'd have food for weekends. I made sure that I checked on everybody because I felt there should have been a need when I needed it. There's people here wouldn't. They wouldn't. They have today. If it wasn't for the soup kitchen. It is something I'm sorry to say, our time has got pretty bad.
We have a lot of people that come here every day. They spend 2 to 3 hours here. We open at 10:30 in the morning and they're here for the lunch. They get to talk to each other. Some of them become good friends. I've met people here that I haven't seen since I left home, and now we're back talking as friends again.
How many people do we know that have a good job? I mean, things have changed in the steel plant. There used to be insurances that would help families, and some of them are being cut back, so they don't even get what they're supposed to get.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's affected everybody.
A lot of the people that I see, they just don't have enough money to live on. You know, they come here to eat, and they don't have enough money. They're living in substandard housing a lot of the times, and I wouldn't want my child to live in those situations. And we really need to help people, the best we can.
I don't ask for any support from my family. They don't offer any, and I don't want any from them. I basically want to be able to stand on my own 2 feet.
We have no core funding, so we rely totally on donations, any grants that we can write or proposals that we can send in. And so, Sault Ste. Marie is a fabulous community because they are supportive, and they support a lot of charitable organizations. But I think it's always scary because I know there's no long-term funding for any of the shelters either. You know, there's really nothing really in place.
Closer to the downtown core, another place is also serving meals to those in need. The Aboriginal Homeless Drop-In Center was recently opened in order to address issues surrounding poverty and homelessness. 10% of Sault Ste. Marie's population is Aboriginal, and there was a need for a service to exist that could address these issues in an Aboriginal context.
Well, there's one mandate, and that is to alleviate homelessness in Sault Ste. Marie. We have a drop-in center, and we offer lunch every day from 12 to 1. What we attempt to do is find housing, safe, affordable housing for people who are homeless or at risk of being homeless.
So I come here for lunch and I help